Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
How's everyone doing?
Great.
Good, good. First of all, I want to thank Dixon for the invitation to come out and speak and just use this as a brainstorming session. We're really excited about different ways that we'll work together. My sort of focus is not going to be so much on policy, but it's really going to be on where and how policy sort of collides with innovation. Andres and I were talking a little bit about the rate of innovation and what happens when innovation sometimes in technology overwhelms various entities and governments. And the slides that I have today is we're going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing to leverage technology innovation with regards to capital access for small businesses. I want to make sure I got this right. The controls here, I hit the wrong button.
Yeah, that's the right one. That should
Okay.
to the right.
So red is good?
I think just to the right.
No. Good. It's a little bit about my background, Silicon Valley, and coming out of technology and having sort of worked in it for so long, and then stepping into a slightly different space. It's always interesting to look at the differences in culture. And so by a show of hands, real quick, how many people here have actually heard of the iBank, California iBank? Okay, great. And Governor's Office of Business? Okay, go Biz. So it's really been an interesting journey. I got a call working in Silicon Valley back in 2010, 2011 by the CEO of one of the iBank FDC corporations. These were 6 basically branches of iBank that actually did the customer-facing access to capital and engagement guarantees and things of that nature. And he said, we're about to get more money than we've ever gotten before, and we have no idea how to get it out the door. I read that. Nightmare of every speaker, right? Right in the middle. I'll turn it off. And so when he said that, I was really sort of shocked. His biggest concern was when in this partnership with the Treasury Department, and this was part of the Jobs Act and the SSBCI, if anyone heard of that. I don't want to throw too many acronyms at you. But the state was basically partnering with the Treasury Department, and the goal was to within 5 years get out about $1.7 billion to small businesses, and the infrastructure that was currently in place was woefully inadequate to engage businesses, do the assessment of those businesses, identify what those needs were, and then partner with private sector banks and financial institutions and provide the capital that was needed for those businesses. And so that sort of started my journey in trying to understand exactly what the state was doing with regards to access to capital and with regards to small business, and primarily in and around the idea of economic impact and job creation. And so I was really impressed to hear that the state had an actual SBA type program in place for, almost 50 years, I believe, I think 1968. And that was the state small business loan guarantee program, very similar to the SBA, but these were state dollars that were being used. Then the state did something else that was really, really innovative. The Clinton administration back in the mid-90s had proposed the idea of an infrastructure bank, actually a network of infrastructure banks throughout the nation. And the 2 states that actually took that challenge on was California and Michigan. They were one of the first 2. And that established here in California iBank. iBank is not part of the state. It is a separate bank. It's the actual legislation was called the Ferguson Peace Act. And it gave the bank broad power basically to lend. And it infused it with about $500 million, about $525 million, and said, go forth and make infrastructure and small business loans and make our communities healthy and create jobs. And so that was the beginning of iBank. GoBiz came a little later under Governor Brown. When he came back into office, one of his big challenges to the sort of bureaucratic red tape that was in place was there were so many different agencies and departments that were doing different areas of support and services and engagement with small businesses, and he wanted it all under one umbrella, one roof, and he brought all of the different organizations into his office, established the Governor's Office of Business and GoBiz, and that's where iBank eventually landed. And so that journey was really interesting because part of what we do now with our program that was originally sort of launched as part of iBank Access to Capital program was to figure out where and how we can leverage technology beyond what was being used at that time. And around that time, we really started to see a huge wave of innovation in the what they call fintech space, which is financial technology. It's basically Wall Street meets Silicon Valley. And I was involved in that. And the idea of being able to provide innovation and to provide sort of digital mechanisms for engagement, for assessment, for credit decisioning and things of that nature was sort of embedded in the whole spirit of fintech. And so the big challenge for the state and its programs was how do we leverage a lot of this technology? I mean, we are California, right? So if any state would be capable and would be able to take on the challenge of leveraging technology, it would be California. And so that was, I think, a very strong element to what we were focusing on within our team and the work that we did. The funds that came in, by the way, through the Treasury Department was what they called designed specifically for economic impact, which meant that you had a fixed amount of time to get that money out into the marketplace, and if you didn't, you lost it. And so there was pressure on the state. The advantage was that any monies that went out, the state would get to keep it. So iBank actually was able to recover the funds that it lent out. iBank has only one program that's actually a direct loan program. The rest of the programs basically serve as guaranteed programs, credit backstops, credit enhancement, you may have heard that term as well. And the beauty of that is that the history of public-private partnerships is sort of built in and hardwired into what iBank does, because it does not, for the most part, lend directly to small businesses. It partners with banks and other financial institutions. We're even starting to work with some fintech firms as well. And the idea is that we'd be able to leverage those dollars and simply provide the guarantee. And that gives, I think, if you will, more ability to expand those dollars and make more use of the funds that it has. So there is one program that is called the Jumpstart program that's a direct loan program, but the rest of the programs that are in place from disaster recovery to the small business loan guarantee program are all credit enhancement or loan guarantee programs. So how does iBank do it with regards to the actual banks? The banks typically join the program. These are some of the banks over the years that have been participants in the program. As I said before, it's streamlined, a little more effective and efficient than the SBA with regards to engaging small businesses. Designed specifically to work with smaller community banks as well. A lot of times those banks simply do not have the manpower or the infrastructure or the back office to do large volumes of SBA lending, but in a regional sort of construct, they're able to be much more effective regionally with regards to serving their small business community, and that program is designed to support folks like that as well. The one interesting aspect to all of this for us is the fact that California, in almost all of the small business category, leads the nation, whether it's diversity, whether it's exporting, whether it's jobs created, whether it's employees that are actually working for small businesses, whether it's the number of micro businesses, these are businesses that typically have 1 or 2 people. And in the construction space, it's a significant portion of businesses that are, 1 to 5 man shops, and these guys are out and working with some folks down in the Central Valley on the high-speed rail, and about to ramp up with the people mover down in LA. And these are small businesses that have been, they're really good at what they do, but they're not necessarily what we call seasoned, strong, knowledgeable financial people that can navigate through the maze of different challenges of the capital that they need to grow their business or even sustain their business. And so, because we're such a huge state, and quite frankly, we are a nation, we'd be part of the G8, which is pretty impressive, I think. But it also puts a lot of responsibility on us to be much more effective and much more aware of the challenges that small businesses have and being able to acquire the capital that they need. So, iBank is interesting because it actually has what I call the left wing and the right wing. Stephanie was talking a little bit about clean energy. iBank actually does a significant amount of investments through what they call the Infrastructure Revolving Loan Fund, and that's to support municipalities and local governments in green and clean energy and sustainable energy as well. And so that program has been around for a while, but over the years, iBank has done about $40 billion, 15 billion of capital into small business community specifically, and about 350,000 jobs either created or retained. The steps for actually engaging through the program is fairly simple. Usually it's an initial assessment. Sometimes what happens is because the banks are participating, the banks will actually bring the clients to the program and engage that way. When that doesn't happen, the network of FDCs will engage and work with them to identify a bank. As I mentioned before, iBank does not do a lot of direct lending. It works through partnerships. And so those banks typically need data that is what we call rigid and is under a rigorous process for compliance reasons, of course. And I think that's the other challenge that we have. The 4 steps are fairly straightforward, but the challenges in those 4 steps is the fact that the data has to be efficient in the way it gets transferred between the state and the financial institution. And that's where the challenges really come in, because businesses don't necessarily specialize in having any type of rigor in the way that they capture their financial data, their financial information. And so it's up to the financial institution and other what we call stakeholders to make sure that that information is properly formatted, properly submitted, so that it can be tracked and measured as well. About 2 years ago, I helped lead a team that was commissioned by the executive director of iBank to really look at the impact. This was shortly after the 2017 wildfires. And the challenge was, are we really leveraging enough? Are we really engaged enough to sort of not only address this new normal that we're now seeing, and that is, how do we ensure that we have effective and efficient capital mechanisms for engaging small businesses, even when there's a disaster? And one of the challenges that we have as a state is not so much disaster recovery, but disaster resilience. And that's a term that's been used post-Katrina. It was really used heavily in that region because it wasn't so much about how quickly you can recover. It was, how do you really deal with the new normal of maybe even having a yearly event that could mean millions, if not billions of dollars of impact on regions within the state? And then how do you engage with the various capital markets and small businesses to re-engage the business and commerce of that region? And so that sort of led to the expansion of a program that we had originally started with the Department of General Services. How many people are familiar with DGS? Okay, great. Department of General Services is basically the state's, I guess, purse strings, I guess, is the best way to do it. They manage all of the procurement, They also manage a lot of the back-end financial management components of the state as well. I primarily would, in the partnership that we had, and we sort of crafted in 2015, was around the idea of why is it that a small business that the state wants to engage, whether it's a small business enterprise or a disabled veteran business on the state side, or if we're using federal dollars, a disadvantaged business enterprise, DBE, why is it that when those businesses get contracts, their challenge now is not so much performing the work, but balancing and leveling out their cash flow, because if they're a subcontractor, it could be 60 to 90 days before they get paid. And so there are a number of bills that were enacted to sort of address that, but you still have the challenge for a lot of businesses of the initial outlay when they get a $500,000 contract or they get a $10 million contract. How efficient are we at being able to create mechanisms where they can use that contract as part of their engagement with capital markets and to get the capital that they need, not only to perform the work, but to build on top of that. And that's one of the challenges that a lot of businesses have, is that I got a $5 million contract, but what happens a year after that or 2 years after that? Do I now wind down and contract my business back down, or do I use this almost as a launch pad and grow my business from there? And so that's one of the other areas that we're really concerned and focusing on as well. So the e-procurement sort of marketplace is the mechanism by which the state engages small businesses for products, goods, and services. By itself, it's about a $26 billion annual market that happens both at the local government as well as at the state level. The state does about $12 billion a year combined in annual spend, and then the local governments, cities, municipalities, and counties, they do about another 12 to 14 billion. So it's a massive marketplace, and it's extremely varied with regards to the actual industry spread. From the term that we use is everything from paper plates to concrete paving, right? I was talking with a small business owner about 2 months ago, and they have a bakery shop, and I was just talking about the different opportunities that the state provides, and they were convinced that their business simply would not fit into any of the things that the state was interested in. And we pulled up the database and showed her that the state did about $15 million in cupcakes last year, right? And so that's the challenge a lot of times, is that businesses simply don't know that an excellent pathway to growth is through the state. And quite frankly, we tell business owners, these are your state dollars, so you may as well figure out a way how to leverage them, especially if the state is really committed to engaging you and working with you. So once the contract is won or awarded, now the challenge is, how do you make sure that those companies and those businesses and those business owners are effective in the way that they not only grow their business, but acquire the capital that they need. So the Capital Access Program sort of expanded and went beyond just the state spend, but just looked at all municipality and local government spending, and sort of look at ways that we can build and expand upon that initial partnership with DGS back in 2015. And we're really excited about this program because it's designed to sort of create a credit window that anyone that wins a state contract can use, potentially use this credit window. We're funded right now about $300 million. We're really excited about that in full capacity. We're hopefully this year we'll be rolling out some new and interesting features to the actual platform itself that I'll share a little bit about here in a couple of slides. But the main thing about the program is that it's designed to ensure that as small businesses engage with any municipality within the state, that their path to building their credit and their credit capability is a streamlined, efficient path. And as Dixon said, this is always about, for us, making sure that it's easier for small businesses to do business not only with the state, but with other organizations and entities throughout the state. So how does that work? So the dashboard itself is a fairly straightforward dashboard. And what we did is for every contract that's awarded, there's a financing button that's there. And we're able to use that as the first sort of contact or engagement mechanism for the small business so that they know that there is a financing component to that's available to them for their business. And then we link that to a number of financial institutions, and they basically engage with the business, and from there, they're off to the races. And this sort of talks about and leads to exactly what Dixon and I believe this particular group is here all about today, and I think in the previous events as well, is sort of built into the way financial institutions do their business is the need for data exchange. And so that's sort of been, I think the maturity level of that in the financial market and financial institutions is well established. With the fintech wave 5 years ago really accelerated it. And so this is all about making sure that as we exchange data, that the financial institutions that we work with are comfortable with the data that they're receiving, that the data is reliable and it is accurate, and it can be used to address the actual credit decisions, because of course every bank, as the Wells Fargo folks know, they're actually by law required to make responsible investments. And so the challenge there is, how did you not know that this company wasn't sufficiently capable of paying back the loan when you gave them that $5 million loan? So information and the ability to acquire that information, consume that information, analyze that information becomes really, really important. And for us, it's sort of been built into the way we do business from the very beginning. The other point that Stephanie made, I think, is really important is measurement. The state and the programs that are run, the key metrics that are really important is jobs created or retained and economic impact. And so double and triple bottom line impact becomes really, really important. And I think now as we move into this new normal with regards to what's going on with our wildfires, that becomes even more important, because the challenge that a lot of cities now are having is that when you have an event like Paradise or Fountain Grove or Coffee Park up in Santa Rosa, the challenge now is, how do we get this community back, and how do we measure how well we've actually been able to bounce back at disaster resiliency? So that becomes really important as well. So part of what we did in looking at that, especially on the financial side, was addressing the challenge that every small business has in collecting their data and making their data available to potential financiers and creditors. And in partnership with the Silicon Valley firm, actually 3 firms, we were able to establish the BizVault. And this is a secure private vault that each business would have and be able to use to store their financial information or any other private information. Consider it a private Dropbox type of service. It's free of charge. It's built into the platform. And literally the idea is that for every small business, once they put their data up in the BizVault, no one can access it. It's encrypted in transit and at rest. It's using industry standard encryption algorithms, and quite frankly, we're partnering with some of the stronger cloud-based storage companies to provide the backend capability. But that small business now controls that data. No one gets to see that private data unless they specifically request it from the small business and the small business grants it. And so the power of that, and we originally thought it was primarily going to be for financial institutions, but what we found out, especially in working with some of the folks down in Central Valley and Southern California, is that prime contractors have a need, not so much for the financial data, but for understanding what's going on with this business with regards to its capacity. If I'm going to take on the responsibility, the state actually has a metric that they call participation goals, and that is for any particular contract, especially public works, there are typically participation goals that are assigned that says X% of this particular contract must go to a certified small business or disabled veteran business, DVBE. If it's federal dollars, then you would have a DBE component to that, disadvantaged business enterprise. And so the challenge that a lot of large primes have is finding, capable, small businesses or subcontractors that are actually able to take on that work. So if I've got a, quite frankly, $100 million contract and I've got a 26% participation goal, I got to figure out how to engage and partner with businesses to the tune of $26 million. And I have to be able to show that there's a commercial useful function that I'm bringing that business in to perform. And so those prime contractors are very much interested in knowing a little bit more about those businesses. And so the BizVault is another way for them to be able to get certain information, again, not necessarily financial, unless that's something that the small business owner is willing to share. The other thing about the BizVault is that any access that's granted has a specified expiration date. And so that information can be viewed, and the small business owner would determine whether or not the information can simply be viewed or downloaded. For financial institutions, of course, they need to download that information, so it's a much more efficient way than sending it via email, much more safer. And so what we're seeing now is, Andres and I talked a little bit about the rate of innovation is that now, if I'm a small business owner and I have my BizVault, now I'm not, if you will, reinventing the wheel every time I take on another project or I try to engage with the state or any municipality with regards to a contract. All of my permanent information is stored in the cloud, and now I can simply engage and point to that information. So that's another, I believe, is going to be an important on-ramp with regards to how we build more efficient ways to exchange data. We are data and format agnostic in what we do, so we're not necessarily married to any protocol, standard, or format with regards to data exchange. But what we try to do is make sure that the information that's there is relevant to the industry. And one of the things that exercises that we recently had was to take a look at the XBRL work that's been done and sort of mapping that to data that we have. And we're pretty impressed to see that about 75–80% of our data elements mapped with the XBRL elements. And so we're excited about simply being able to have a way of at least sharing information that through technology can be used to map between the two. So we're excited about that as well. The 1.2 million businesses that we work with throughout the state is a challenging sort of prospect of what we do because each business is a unique entity unto its own. And the big challenge that we typically see with those businesses is, especially when it comes to banks and financial institutions, is not necessarily wanting to spend significant time, energy, and resources on businesses that simply are not ready for capital or not ready to take on that larger project. And so for us, it's being able to have the right types of mechanisms in place that can deal with businesses and their needs where they are and provide relevant resources, capabilities, and services regardless of the state of the business. So, for example, we're working with a business that just was awarded a $140 million contract. At the same time, I talked with a business owner that just got a $40,000 contract. Now, the difference between those two businesses are night and day with regards to their sophistication, but with regards to how the state views them, it really isn't. These are all businesses that at one point were a $40,000 contract that grew to a $140 million contract. And so once again, part of what we do is to make sure that the support and the services that we provide are relevant regardless of what stage you are in your business. The other component that I will share in the BizVault aspect of it is that we talk with business owners all the time, and they may have say letters of acknowledgments or company profiles and things of that nature. Or there could be what we call state data that's available through the public sector and we're able to put that information up in the cloud so it's found in one place as well. And we find that that's going to be, and based on some of the discussions that we've had with our stakeholders, it's really going to help ensure that the information can be found in one place as opposed to, once again, having to go to 5 different places. So for example, on the public data side, we're starting to bring in data from the California State License Board. So that information now is being automatically populated into each business's business vault. Why? It's public data. So if you are a stakeholder, if you are someone that's looking to engage with that business, it would be nice to go one place and find that data as opposed to going to 7 different data sources. So we're excited about that as well. The advantage that we have with that is being able to link that data and make sure that data is still relevant and up to date is a challenge. And one of the things that we're really excited about in the coming quarters, we're hoping to really take a deep dive into is leveraging, once again, new technologies like blockchain to address that. So that's something that you may be hearing. I'm not at liberty to talk much about it, but that's something that we're definitely looking at with regards to public data, because we believe it's going to be, I think, a key benefit for anyone that's working with small businesses. So the last part and point that I'd like to make is that if anyone knows Dixon, I call it, he says that he's a chief squirrel herder, I think is that. I call him the gate crasher. Back in my college days, I wish I knew him. I'd be able to get into a lot of places that I probably was underage because he would figure out a way to get through. But anyway, Dixon has been absolutely tireless in his passion for really addressing the need for what he calls, or what he tells me is, machine-readable data for businesses. And we're excited about being able to expand our marketplace to support surety services. What that means is that we're looking in the Q3 timeframe to be able to make surety services available, built into the platform, in the same way that businesses would engage with financial institutions, they would be able to engage with regards to surety services as well. The advantage, once again, that we have with that is that we've already had those public partnerships, public-private partnerships, and key collaborations with financial institutions. So this really isn't that different. And the other thing, quite frankly, is that a lot of the financial data that we use for our credit decisioning is information that surety uses as well. So I believe that we're sort of operating in 2 different spheres, but the waves are going in the same direction, and I believe that there's an opportunity here for us to have those waves combine and really have a huge impact not only on the state, but also across the nation and hopefully across the globe. So with that, happy to I'll be here afterwards and happy to share with you any details if you're in the surety space and would like to know a little bit more. Dixon's going to be driving that, him and Larry, I believe. And so we're definitely looking forward to having continued conversations with folks that are in the surety space in any capacity. And thanks again for the time, and appreciate it. And give it back to Dixon.